Very good. We're happy to see those who are here tonight. We appreciate you being with us. We're going to open the Word of God in the book of Psalms, chapter number 46. We'll read the whole chapter. It's only 11 verses. It starts with the title of the chief musician for the sons of Korah, a song of Alma. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore will not we fear, though the earth may be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though the waters thereof roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with the swelling thereof. Selah. There is a river, the streams whereof shall make glad the city of God, the holy place of the tabernacle of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God shall help her, and that right early. The heathen raged, the kingdoms were moved. He uttereth his voice, the earth melted. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. Come, behold the works of the Lord, with desolation he hath made in the earth. Desolation he hath made in the earth, excuse me. He maketh war to cease unto the end of the earth. He breaketh the bow and cutteth the spear in sunder. He burneth the chariot in the fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. You might notice as we were reading that 3 times over, we get that little expression, Selah. It means to stop, to pause, to look up, and to think about what we were just reading. So the chapter itself is divided into 3 parts right around those words Selah, and we're going to look at it with the help of the Lord. Now, we have been looking at the subject of God as our river. I feel like it's important, and we trust that we've learned a few things from it. And the first thing we notice in Psalms chapter 1, that he's the river of purity. And as we thought of that, we looked at verse number 3, and he's talking about a godly man. He says, he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. So God is our river, and here we are the ones who receive from God as plants, as it were, being able to serve God and to grow, as we were hearing in our worship, our prayer this evening. We also saw that it wasn't only a river of purity, but God is a river of pleasure. And we saw that last week in chapter 36. In verse 8, they shall be abundantly satisfied. God is going to be the one who gives us the satisfaction, not the world. They shall be abundantly satisfied with the fatness of thy house, and thou shalt make them drink of the river of thy pleasures. Wonderful thing it is it not, to be able to enjoy the rivers of God's pleasure. God has his pleasures, and we can enjoy them. They're for our good, and just for our good. Okay. Now tonight we want to look at another aspect of God as our river. He is the river of peace. That's what we're going to see as we go through this chapter, we trust, because it's peace in the midst of turmoil. And that's when you need the peace the most. I remember studying on the book of Philippians and about the peace of God that passes all understanding. And that's not Philippians, but anyway, I was thinking about that subject, and I read about a artist who or a place they wanted to give the best painting. I think it was like $100,000 or something, and the one who had the best description of what peace is. And I'll never forget it. They get down to about two paintings that were left for the judges to decide on. And one of them was a beautiful painting of a house on a mountain and trees and birds singing in there and the river and a lake, and everything was just peaceful. It was as best as you could get it. And everybody thought, well, that would be number one for sure. But then the next one that came up was a waterfall. Dark, dark clouds. A torrential rain. And there was underneath the waterfall, in the midst of that rain, there was a little bird. And the little bird was sitting on a branch that was sticking out behind the waterfall. And there he was, quiet and content, with a storm that was all around him, sitting there enjoying himself. That was the one that really won the prize. Because they said that's what true peace is. True peace is not really having everything around you going real nice. True peace is when things are not going well, for you to be able to be in peace with God in the midst of devastation. And that's what we have here in this chapter. He is the river of our peace. So as we think of that, the first thing that was brought to our attention is that he is our refuge. As we get to the river, we're going to work our way there to it. But he's first of all our refuge, because that's where our peace comes from. God is our refuge and strength and a very present help in trouble. So he's telling us, and as you look at this chapter, if we read it together, I don't know if you noticed it, but 7 times we get the word God. It's as if he's putting his signature on this chapter. He says, this is mine, and this is my message to you. And 7 times in 11 verses, we have God. That's truly what life is really, what gives meaning and purpose to life. It's God. So the first thing he tells us in this verse is God is, and then he gives us 3 things telling us who God is. He is our refuge. He is our strength. He is helpful, a very present help in trouble. So we're introduced to God, who he is, and what he is involved in when it comes to helping us in our lives. The first thing is a refuge. You know, it's one thing to have a refuge. People have them, different places they might go or whatever. But to have a refuge that will withstand the blast of the something that has happened in your life, a refuge that will hide you, a hiding place where you can feel like that little bird in the midst of a tremendous storm, feel at peace and comfortable. So the refuge has to be strong. The refuge has to be adequate. It has to meet the need that I have at this moment when I'm going through whatever trial it may be, whatever discomfort it might feel, whatever temptation it might be. I need a refuge. That refuge has to be, well, strong. So God is not only my refuge, he's my strength. He provides the help. He provides the protection that I need as a refuge for myself. But then, not only is he my refuge, not only is he my strength, but he's my helper. And he's a present help in the time of need. Now, I looked up that word present. I thought maybe I had the wrong word because of the definitions they were given to me. But I found out it was the right word. And the words that they were given to me were, the word present means, or the present help means to find, to meet, to get. To find, to meet, to get. Now this is why I put it together. To find. That means if God is my present help in the time of my need, He is acceptable or acceptable. In other words, he's within my reach. He's findable, if you can use that word. It's not a good word, but he is one that we can find. He's there. He's present. I don't know about you, but sometimes you get in a situation and you feel like, oh, if I could just get a hold of brother so-and-so, or if I could find a good lawyer, or whatever it might be, and you go to call them and no answer. They don't pick up. But it's not that way with God. He's a very present help in the time of need. And so we're finding here that he is acceptable. He's one that we can find. And then he is to meet. Now, the word meet, of course, I'm thinking about my need intersecting with God's presence. And so a very present help in the time of need. I have this need, I have this disturbance, I have this unrest in my heart, whatever it is, and as it moves forward, searching for contentment, peace, and joy, it intersects with God, who is a very present help in the time of need. So he's one that we can find. You don't have to worry about if he's going to be available. He's one that we can meet up with. And the other one, to get. To find, to meet, to get. And that's the part of maybe I like as much as any of them, is God is ready to give what I need. The inner strength, the help that I need in my life at whatever difficult time I might be in. You know, using this word, a hiding place, as a refuge. I'm going to use it again in a few more minutes. But God is our refuge. I don't know if you ever heard of a lady called Corrie ten Boom. Most of you probably have. She and her family, her father and her sister, and she protected Jews during the time of the invasion of the Nazis. And Nazis finally caught up with them, and they took them to an extermination camp in a place called Ravensbrück. I'm not probably saying that very good with a very good German accent. But anyway, there they were, and if you know anything about the story, they were living in the worst conditions you can possibly imagine. When finally Corrie ten Boom was allowed to go home, she was let go. She wrote this book, My Hiding Place. And the purpose of the book is, though her surroundings and the condition that she found herself in were deplorable, they were terrible. The threat of death was on her, always there with her. And yet, in the midst of all that, she found God as her hiding place. So we get encouragement by this as we look at the verse again. Our God is our strength, our refuge, our strength, and our very present help in time of need. Therefore, you say, well, okay, I can accept my God as a refuge. I can see him as my strength and one who gives me strength. I can see him who is always present there with me, especially when everything is going smooth, when everything is going the direction that I want it to go. But that's not the case here. He says, therefore, because God is my refuge, therefore will not I fear. Now, I just stopped right there. Therefore, because who God is, I will not fear. Now, how, as I go through this checklist, and I hear that, okay, this is who God is. Is this all this for me? How do I know personally if I am enjoying God at this level? How would I know? Well, I think it's right here. Since God is all this, therefore, will not we fear? We will not. In other words, God is going to take the fear, the anxiety, the what it is inside of us that would normally cause us to be overwhelmed, we're going to be able to just put it in his hands. Later on in this particular verse, or this chapter we just read, I think it's in verse 10. If you want to look at it in your Bible, you can. But in verse 10, it says, "Be still and know that I am God." Now, the word "be still" has this feeling or this thought behind it. It says, take your hands off. My mom used to tell me that when I tried to put my hand in the cookie jar, okay? Take your hands off. Well, that's what God tells me. Take your hands off. Be still and know that I am God. How is it that I'm going to get to the point where I know whether or not I trust God? Well, it's when I can come to the point where I say, okay, God, I don't know the future. I don't know what's going on. I'm sometimes a little bit lost, but I can trust God and not have fear of the consequences. He'll work it out. And I know that can be hard, and I know sometimes it's almost impossible. But it's what he's telling us to do, because that's what brings the most glory, joy to God. Now, you say, well, okay, trust God. I will not have to fear, because, from that point on, it's going to be just wonderful life. It's going to be, everything's going to just fall into place, and I will live successfully. I will live in tranquility. I will live enjoyment. Everything will be... No. Notice what he says. Though 4 times over in 2 verses, we're going to get that word though. In Spanish, it's only 2 times, but it has an and in there. And he said, therefore, though the earth is removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea. Verse 3 says, though the waters thereof roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with the swelling thereof. Selah. In other words, I still have to trust him. I still have to put it in his hands, even though the earthquakes are causing everything to fall down. The tsunamis are rising up out of the ocean. They're destroying everything in its path. Even though my house was one of those houses that was involved in a tsunami, no matter what it is, though all that is happening, I don't have fear. Because God is my refuge, my strength, and God is a very present help in the time of need. So we don't want to spend more time on that, but here he is talking to us about the importance of trusting God in the midst of the hardships of life. So the one who is my refuge, God, is also my refreshment. He's my refreshment. Well, that's important too, because I'm not just grinding something out. I need to be refreshed in my life. I need to be able to understand that life is not just a drudgery, it's a joy. And what gives us joy is that we refresh ourselves in our God. Now, how do I do that? Well, the writer is talking about crushing waves. The writer is talking about storms. The writer is talking about the world falling apart. He's talking out, it's almost described what happened there several years ago. What do they call it? Terrible Tuesday, was it? When the Twin Towers in New York came crushing down, and there it was, everybody, well, it was like the end of everything for people. And they looked out there, and I've seen those towers too. And I think our grandkids did too, but no, they didn't either, because their dad was in high school when that happened. Anyway, but the towers in New York, it just changed the whole landscape of the city of New York. And that's what the writer is saying. The whole landscape of life can change, but I have God. I have peace. I have him as my fortress. So he says in verse 4 of the chapter, he says, there is a river. After all the crushing waves and the shaking waters and everything that's happening, there is a river. The streams whereof shall make glad the city of God, the holy place of the tabernacle of the Most High. Now, what is he referring to? You remember when we started this study, I talked about that little deer that came out from the mountains, hungry and thirsty. He tried to find water. And finally, he could hear the water with his keen ears. And with his keen nose, he could smell the water. And he went over, and here there was a little hole. And the water was running in an aqueduct underneath. Now, where did I get that story from? I got it from right here. King Hezekiah was king of Israel at that time. The Assyrian army had been marching all through the land, and they were capturing nation after nation, people after people, and they were cruel. I cannot tell you from a public platform the cruelty that they did, the way they treated people in such cruelty and hatred and the things that they would do. And the people were fearful. They were scared to think that we're the next one in line. And sure enough, as they were getting closer and closer to Jerusalem, King Hezekiah said, we need water. Jerusalem is one of the few cities in the whole wide world that doesn't have a river going nearby them, or a water supply somewhere near. There they are, sitting there, and there's no way to get the water to them naturally. So Hezekiah said, listen, we're going to build an aqueduct. We're going to build a tunnel. And in that tunnel, we're going to have the water flow from the mountains down in through and over to this city. And that's how the reason for that the aqueduct, so that when the Assyrians were to come and they surround the city, put it under siege, the thought that they had was this: all we have to do is hold on for a couple of months maybe, and they'll run out of water. And when they run out of water, then it's be a matter, they'll just give up, and we will not be able to, we'll be able to take over the city with no problems. Well, what the Syrians didn't understand and did not know is that Hezekiah prepared for this occasion. And he had his men go and make that tunnel. And it came to a point where as they got closer to Jerusalem, there was this solid rock. And so going through rock is not easy. And so what he did, he put a group of men on this side and another group of men on the other side, and they started to tunnel. You can only imagine. They didn't have the fancy tools like we have today. They tunneled by chipping and chipping and chipping, and this end to this end, and they kept working at it and working at it. And the marvel of it is that when they came to the point where the 2 points came together, there they were. The man who came from this angle and the man who came from this angle met. Sometimes people can build a bridge or something like that, and they come across from over here, and they come across from over here, and when they get over here, it's like that. But here, before all the engineering things that we have today, they were able to do it, where they were able to meet together. And then the water started to flow. And I don't know how it was. Sometimes I wonder, could it be maybe some of those soldiers up on the walls there of Jerusalem, and they saw those armies, 100,000 men down there, Assyrians. I kind of wonder, as those Assyrians, because they didn't have water either, and these men would go down to this place, this aqueduct, and they'd fill their little jugs up with water, and they would go up to the top of the wall there, and they would stand and go, I don't know. Maybe they did. Maybe they did. But they couldn't. Those men down there, they couldn't understand where was the water coming from. It was all hidden. They didn't know what was happening. Ah, brethren and sisters, you and I, we have a river. The world does not know anything about this river. They've never tasted up from this river. They never have enjoyed the satisfaction that this river can produce. They live in a barren land, and there they are without any enjoyment as far as real joy is concerned. It says about this river, it says that the streams thereof make glad the city of God. In other words, these people, they enjoyed it. It was clean, it was pure, it was wonderful to taste. And you can imagine the heat of all that was happening. And those other men out there, they were hot too, and they were thirsty too. But they didn't have what they had, the people that were inside the city of God. The people that were in the city of God, they were enjoying the water of God. And their thirst was being quenched because of what they enjoyed. So we're able to see something that other people can't see. We're able to know things that other people can't know because of the relationship that we have with our God. And then he says the holy place of the tabernacles of the Most High. And so that water was used in the offerings that were going on there in the tabernacle for the going forth of the Word of God and the things of God. Now, verse 5 tells us not only did they have a river of water, but they had God again. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God shall help her, and that right early. So, in verse 4, the river. In verse number 5, it really has to do with the rising of the sun. You see where it says there, God shall help her, and that right early. The idea is when the sun just starts to break over the horizon, God is there. He's there early in the morning, and he's there to be with her, and to be there to help the people that were in the city of God. So it's a blessing to be able to enjoy these things, and in person, the place that we have with our relationship with our God. Then in verse 6, the heathen raged, the kingdoms were moved. I was just enjoying this. I'll just share this real quickly. The heathen rage, you've seen that in the riots that we have. The heathen rage, the kingdoms were moved. He uttered his voice, and the earth melted. I like that. All the raging, all the yelling, all the screaming, couldn't change a thing. But all he has to do is to utter his voice, and the earth melted. And we'll be able to finish here. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. You'll notice, if you did when we were reading, verse 7 and verse 11 are exactly the same. Same thing. God doesn't have to fill up the Bible with just empty words. There's a reason why he put it twice in this chapter. We looked at other chapters where the same exact verse, one time we saw it 2 times in one chapter and 1 time in the very next chapter. So God does this for a purpose. And what is it? The Lord of hosts is with us. They're the host of the armies that were out there around Jerusalem. But the Lord of hosts was with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Why did he say the God of Jacob? Why didn't he say the God of Abraham? I mean, Abraham was a mighty man of God who left, well, you know the story. Why didn't he say the God of Isaac? I mean, Abraham is a picture of God giving his son. Isaac is the son. But Jacob has a bad history. Jacob wasn't a very nice person. And yet it was to Jacob that God revealed the truth of the gathering center, Bethel. And it was there in that place where Jacob passed the night that God spoke to him, revealed to him what you and I enjoy even today. God had mercy on a man like Jacob. And he's going to have mercy on you and I. Sometimes we feel, like Jacob, We do not deserve it. If we got what we deserved, well, we wouldn't have a fortress. We would not have a refuge. We would not have God as a very present help. God wouldn't get close to me because of. Well, Jacob felt like that oftentimes as well. But God, he directed the writer of this psalm to say that he is, what is it? That the God of Jacob is our refuge. One more thing. The word refuge in chapter 1 is what I was saying, a hiding place. The word refuge in verse 7 and verse 11 is a little bit different. It's a high place. When it comes to the understanding of who God is for us, he lifts us up above the circumstances. He lifts us up above the turmoil and the world that is falling apart from underneath us. He lifts us above all that, and he brings us to the high place where we have that sweet communion and fellowship with him. So may God help us not to live under the circumstances, but may God help us to live above the circumstances. Let us pray.